Good morning and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, so get ready to get triggered. Good morning and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, as you might have heard in our intro, and with me is my expert panel, as always, Amara, Samuel, and Jessica. How are you guys?
Great.
Awesome. Good.
Good to hear. So, before we begin, all opinions expressed are not those of Ryerson or Ryerson faculty and are only those of the individual commentators. Viewer discretion is advised. So let's get into our weekly recap. We're going to start with the cell phone ban in class. So the new Ford government has put a ban on cell phones in high school and elementary. If you do have a cell phone in elementary school, they are not permitted. Students are not permitted to use their cell phones unless otherwise instructed by teachers. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, so if the teachers want them to, are doing something with cell phones in class, then it's allowed. So then I think, how are they going to enforce it? I don't think it really means anything. Kids are going to have their cell phones on them and they're going to use them. I think working to incorporate them into the classroom will help more than just trying to outright ban them.
I think so too. We're in the age of technology. You can't ignore that. When I was in high school still, we didn't have as much, it wasn't as embedded as it was even when, just after I left high school. I have a younger sister, and when she was in grade 12 and after I just left, that's when they started doing things like D2L, and you can communicate with your teachers through email and have course syllabuses online and everything like that, which I think is a really essential tool because that's what we're used to now as university students, and it makes it a lot easier and a lot, it aids in our learning. And Google is it can be a really, there's obviously some cons, but it can be a really useful tool in aiding in somebody's education. So if you're going to just outright ban that at the, concession of the teacher, you could come across a lot bigger issues down the line, because especially if you have a teacher who's incredibly anti-phone or anti-anything, you could really be doing some more damage than good. Obviously there should be some control over it. A student shouldn't necessarily be on it when, class is in session, but that comes down to the maturity level of the student as well. And even if you do put in all these bans and stuff like that, students will still find a way to use it. It's not like, they'll go inside their desk or they'll go under the desk or whatever, how we did it when we were students. So it's not like, because government has banned it, now nobody is going to ever be using their phones in class, especially if they're still allowed in the school building. You're not going to get away from it. It's kind of pointless.
Sam?
Yeah, I think it's pretty toothless unless, the teacher was pretty vigilant, which I know a lot of my teachers growing up. But then again, it wasn't so integrated. But a lot of my teachers growing up weren't as vigilant, patrolling the students. So the only way I can think of it working is if the students were to put their phones in a cubby or some kind of box at the beginning of class, and then they would get them back. But I think
just take away class time
at the beginning, but most people come in, right when class starts.
Yeah.
This is high school. I have to think back to it, but most people are there when it starts. So I think unless, it's taken away right at the beginning, it's kind of pointless.
Interesting. So basically we're all in accordance with each other. It's, okay. Well, usually we're not. That's the point of the Raben Report. Let's move on to Elizabeth May. Has stepped down or will be stepping down as the leader of the Green Party. As Amara said before we started the show, she tripled the amount of seats that the party had, from a total of 1 to 3, which in itself is a big accomplishment. So what's your take on her leaving, Amara?
It is, it's only 3 seats. So saying she tripled it, it makes it seem like more than it is. But she did push the party further, I think. And I do think it was time for her to step down. I hope that the next person who leads the party can push it further than she did. I think she did a lot to get the Green Party's foot in the door when it comes to just federal politics in Canada. So I hope her successor does more.
Jessica? I know you were a big
100%.
fan of her and the party.
Yeah, I love her. I think everything that she's done is absolutely incredible, and it's so commendable and respectful. I was reading as to why she was leaving, and it's incredibly challenging, and it's a lot of time and it's a lot of work that she had to put into that position, and it was for personal reasons that she wants to step away from it. That doesn't discount any of the work that she's done to this point. It just leaves room for a successor to come in and potentially do more and carry on the legacy that she created.
Fair. And Sam?
I wasn't really a big fan of her politics, so I think any answer I would give is biased. But I mean, if she wants to step down, the party has obviously gotten bigger. So,
do you not credit her for the work that she's done for it and to give it its rise, though?
I think the rise to it may better be attributed to people's increasing knowledge of climate issues. But I think as a leader, she didn't really do a good job articulating maybe her party's platform. I think her debate performance was kind of terrible, but I think the success of the party is more so to do with the emergence of this climate issues.
I think as the only woman in those debates where she was like constantly over talked and wasn't given the platform, she really had to fight to have that platform to even be able to get her voice heard. It just shows her power and her diligence and what she was fighting for. And I think as a leader, if you can have somebody that can do that, then you have a pretty strong leader, somebody that can fight for not only to get their own opinions and own voices heard across platforms, but to express the views of other people that support her. I mean, that's all you really want in a leader. And she never gave up, and she never stood away from a fight. Like she powered through it.
Yeah, she was a woman in a boys' club basically, and she was fighting to get a word in, like Jessica was saying. That's in regards to what you said about the debates, that you said her performance was terrible, but I don't know. I think it was just circumstantial.
Yeah, she was. It was not. And plus, how those debates were structured. That's
She
just a
also-
whole different argument. That sucked. But
She wasn't at one of them, right?
Yeah.
She wasn't even invited to one of them.
yeah, which it's just pure sexism. There's no
I don't
discounting
know
that.
if it was. I feel like they didn't think like.
I mean, PPC wasn't invited either. Not that the
That's
PPC
not
and the
a-
Green
it's
are on
not
the
a-
same level,
yeah,
but
then
it's still...
not a fair
They're the smaller
debate.
parties.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a fair debate if they're not there, but I don't know
Yeah.
if it was.
I think it had a
necessarily
part of it.
sexist. I don't know.
I don't know. But finally, our last story in the weekly update is that the CEO of McDonald's has stepped down following the fact that he was in a relationship with one of the employees of McDonald's. So he stepped down. Apparently, they have a policy where you cannot be in a relationship with an employee. What's everyone's take on that? Should companies be allowed to dictate whether or not you can be romantically involved with your employees? Amara, you're shaking your head yes.
Yeah,
Why is that?
I think it's just if you're the boss and you're in a relationship with one of your subordinates, it's a conflict of interest. And I think that it makes sense that there are policies against that. I think he did the right thing by stepping down if he was going to pursue the romantic relationship further.
I mean, what position was this employee in? Was it somebody that works in one of the stores, or was it somebody that was directly under him that could have received special treatment?
That I'm not too sure about, but he was the CEO, and it obviously wasn't somebody in a higher position because they probably would have resigned as well.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, nepotism is part of the corporate world. I don't agree with it, so yeah.
You don't agree with nepotism?
I don't think so. It's not a fair and equal way to choose a right employee. If you're only
But-
getting hired because I know your dad, or I know your uncle, or because this is your last name, even though there could be 100 other people that are more equipped for that position, why should you solely get the job based on who you know?
Because life isn't fair, and that's basically the entire entertainment industry. It's all about nepotism.
So you're saying
So that's
that
okay,
nepotism
though?
should happen because life isn't that doesn't mean
I don't
it
think
should
nepotism.
happen.
I don't think nepotism should be discounted. Like if it happens, then that's the person's right to hire
Of
their.
course, it's their right,
Yeah.
but that doesn't
But it
mean
doesn't mean
it
it's
is right.
right.
It's unfair, just by definition. Just because it exists doesn't mean that it's just.
I think CEOs are held to a higher standard, and more so maybe the individual, the CEO, having a misconduct is bad, but to show that to the rest of the company that this type of behavior, breaking the rules in any sort of way is permissible, is not a good look.
Yeah,
That's
it could have
fair.
been done for we'll show you.
That's fair. Those are all fair points. So now that we've finished our weekly recap, let's move on to our main story today, which is the opioid crisis. This topic is more serious than our previous shows, as people are literally dying every day at the hands of drug abuse. An opioid, for those who don't know, is a generic term for pain-relieving medication that reacts with the opioid receptors in our brain, such as morphine and codeine. Right now, we are in a state of crisis, as far too many people have become addicted. According to the Government of Canada, there have been more than 9,000 apparent opioid-related deaths since 2016. In 2017, approximately 11 lives were lost each day because of opioid overdoses. Many others have been hospitalized because of an opioid overdose, and on top of that, 94% of opioid overdose deaths happen by accident, and young Canadians aged 15 to 24 are the fastest growing population requiring hospital care from opioid overdoses. How has this crisis grown, and what are we doing about it? On today's show, we find out. Now remember, we are live on Facebook, so make sure to comment on our feed to have your thoughts read live on air. So let's start with, how are opioids made available? Amara?
Prescriptions.
Yeah, as far as I know, people are usually prescribed them, and that's where the addiction begins.
And so this, obviously, prescribed medication leads to addiction. But
Not always.
No?
No.
Not always, yeah. But how do people become addicted? If it's prescribed, how do people become addicted if they need their doctors?
For example, I would assume that if you have some sort of injury or you had a surgery and you're prescribed opioids for the pain relief, you could still become, even though you have a legitimate reason to use them, you could still become dependent on them, especially if the prescription is maybe for a little bit longer than you necessarily need it to heal and you're still taking them. I think that's where it would begin.
When opioids were first introduced, I remember reading this up, the studies that were done on them before their introduction didn't really take into account or observe the fact that they were highly addictive, or addictive to such a large degree as we found. So I think even today there's some sort of overprescription, and that could be either pushed by the pharmaceutical companies or the doctors not knowing the appropriate dosage or the prescription schedule. But I think most people that are on them have been prescribed them in a legitimate way, but just...
They're also incredibly expensive if you were to buy them. Like the prescription drug use has really risen the last few years as well. You can buy it from your dealer or whomever, different types of opioids and different types of pain relievers. And if you combine that with other substances, you can get a different sort of high. I'm not talking from personal experience here, but so that as well. That's why you hear a lot of pharmaceutical ads like, get rid of your prescriptions properly, bring it back to the proper pharmacist so that they can dispose of it properly. But individuals that may not necessarily need them but are being prescribed them take them, and then they could sell it privately or personally, even though that's a ginormous offense to do so. But that's how it gets spread as well. The opioid crisis does not just affect individuals who have been prescribed it from their physician. It could be from individuals who sell it into the market and get other people who want to experience using drugs using prescription drugs in that sense, not for its intended purposes, but for an additional more. I don't know how to say this. Fun purpose.
But so, do you think with prescriptions and doctors handing out these prescriptions, do you think that doctors are part of the problem? If say somebody says they need the prescription, but the doctor feels that in his professional opinion they don't, but he still gives a prescription?
Well, then that's unethical towards the doctor's standpoint. A doctor isn't supposed to prescribe something that they know is not necessary. Even, I go to the doctor and I need just like a simple prescription, like birth control or something. It's a really long, extensive process where you have to.
It is.
They have to ask you a bunch of questions. They have to see why you're using it. You have to ask, is it actually something that you need, or is there a better source for you? So it's not like you're not going to go, especially, and birth control is so much less invasive and harmful than a very addictive opioid substance, in my opinion, anyway. So if I were to go to the doctor and had like back pain or something, or coming off a surgery, it's not just going to be like, my back hurts right now and I would like some painkillers. It's going to be an extensive process to see if it's actually something that you need. And there's different levels and there's different intensities of each prescription. You can either get something as low, like when I personally had wisdom teeth surgery, you got T3s, which is stronger Advil. And it technically is on the opioid spectrum, but it's not anywhere near like the morphine level.
You can still get addicted to T3s, though.
Oh, for sure you can, but it's not going to be as, a doctor will more likely prescribe you a T3 for pain relief than go right to the really potent morphine pills or morphine.
But the question I'm trying to ask is, does this happen? Even though it's unethical from the doctor's standpoint, is that part of the reason that people can become addicted?
I'm sure. I mean, there's probably a lot of like payoffs, and there's definitely documented payoffs that goes on between pharmaceuticals and private physicians. So yeah, it's obviously going to be a huge factor within the rise of opioid use. I don't know the exact figures because I don't think any doctor is going to readily admit that they just overtly prescribed because they're getting paid off by, Pfizer or whomever to use the drugs and everything. So, yeah, I'm sure it's an issue. I'm sure it's a big part of it as well. I don't know how much in the grand scheme percentile of things it's really affecting it, but yeah, I'm sure there's a big cause for that.
Well, to my understanding, there's two populations. There's people that unfortunately get it overprescribed and fall victim to the addiction, or there's people that are in an already unfortunate situation or circumstance, and they are having a tough time, and they're vulnerable, and then through an illegal avenue, they obtain these opiates and that become addicted. I tried looking for information about, what the percentile is between those two groups, and I couldn't find anything.
So that's where we're going next. How did we get to a crisis? So how did these drugs make it into the black market, onto the streets? Because one doctor, two doctor gives out a prescription when it's not needed, but the point where 9,000 people have died since 2016 of apparent overdoses. How did we get here?
I think the combination of all those factors, like the overprescription of them, as well as people not disposing of their prescriptions in the correct way, as well as people in unfortunate circumstances who are using drugs. I also think there's a lot of, I don't know if this is necessarily related to this, but with party drugs, there's a lot of overdoses with those, with fentanyl now. A lot of people are dying because they're accidentally, like it's in Coke or something, and they don't realize, and they die because of that. So I think that's happening now as well.
And fentanyl, you can die on such a
just a couple
really
grams.
small portion, less than a couple grams. A couple grams is a lot.
Grains.
Oh, grains.
Grains,
You die.
Where did fentanyl come from, and how did it make it into substances like cocaine? Like, has it been in marijuana? I don't know.
No. So fentanyl is an opioid, and I know someone personally that was through the process of giving birth was, I don't remember exactly if she accepted it, but as a painkiller, she was given a fentanyl drip. So my understanding is it's used in rare circumstances in the medical field when extremely necessary, but I think a majority of it now, the street fentanyl, is either from East Asia, and it tends to be spliced or cut into other drugs to enhance.
Because it's cheaper. So they cut it with Coke and stuff.
But because it's so volatile, even a small miscalculation could kill someone.
But how did it get here? So how did fentanyl make its way onto the streets? If it was a private medication that was used for pain, who put it there? Is it the doctors who got it onto the streets? Is it people who were using it? Like, how did we get to a crisis? That's the question.
If you look at all the controversy and all the what's the word? If you look at all the controversy and all the payoffs and all the scandals or conspiracy theories behind our pharmaceutical companies, there is a lot of payoff that goes on, and certain pharmacists are paid more to sell a certain drug or to promote a certain drug, or certain doctors are told more to promote it, to prescribe this for these kind of ailments, even if it isn't the particular ailment, because of money. Like, there's so much money that is involved in pharmaceuticals. It's not, just an easy, there's no money in this. It's drugs. People need drugs. People need prescriptions, and for the whole healthcare industry. So when you have that overprescription and you have those payoffs going on under the table, where if you promote a certain thing, or if you promote a certain drug, or advertise to have it sold more to patients, you're going to have the rise of certain illegal streams of drugs being used for their not intended purpose. And that could be fentanyl, that could be opioids. It's all kind of one very, very broad category. So if you look at fentanyl, for example, when it does have its place in the proper mathematical, scientific, use in medicine, but you're using it for an intention that is not for its specific intention, and you don't really understand the vastness of what it's being used for or why you're needing it, you're going to come across a lot of issues, and you're going to come across a lot of problems. And even if you don't look at just, let's say it's not just the relationship between pharmaceuticals and doctors who are having that corruption, it could be between pharmaceuticals and people that are in the drug industry, or whoever's out there selling drugs or whatever. But you could have that corruption there, where it gets easily into the streams of commercial drug, of recreational drug use.
Yeah, from my understanding, fentanyl isn't something that's prescribed, so I don't think over-prescription necessarily could introduce it to the market. I think it's only something given on site in hospitals. So I think I would have to do more research, but to my understanding, it's mainly from illegal sources where this is coming from, into drugs that are already, deemed illegal, like certain party drugs and
it goes with like drug trafficking, right?
Yeah.
Like it's where we get coke or Molly and that stuff from. That's where it's coming from as well.
And now let's talk about the biggest pockets of where addiction is prevalent. So we have, for example, Hamilton and Vancouver. Those are big pockets of overdoses. And why are those two big areas in Canada that it's happening?
Well, Vancouver already has a really bad crime problem in general, so I think that just added to it. It probably they have a lot of homeless people and a lot of just the downtown east side of Vancouver is one of the worst postal codes in Canada. So I think it just contributed to that. There's probably already a lot of drug users there.
And when you say the worst postal code in Canada, why?
I mean, I'm not necessarily sure why specifically the downtown east side of Vancouver, but there's just a lot of crime that exists there. It probably has to do with high costs of living and lots of homeless people that are there. And yeah, so they're just a vulnerable population, I think, in general.
Yeah, I think any place has the high rates of homelessness, or changes in the market price of homes, changes in the job market. I think we can talk about Calgary. I have some stats about Calgary later.
Yeah.
But any of those two factors makes a population more vulnerable. I think that I was going somewhere with that.
As well, even if you look at it from the most basic and kid level, speaking from personal experience, when you grow, I grew up in a really small town and you couldn't do anything there. There was nothing. It was literally all farmland, and so your Friday nights were spent having a party in a farmland, in a cornfield. You know what I'm saying? When you have that level of boredom with children, or when kids are starting to go out and party and experience. Not saying every kid does. I mean, I didn't personally, but you're going to experience with alcohol at the very that's probably the safest compared to fentanyl usage and whatever. But there's going to be the experience. There's going to be trying out with different types of recreational drugs, and if it's not the most clean drug, then you could be coming across a lot of issues as well. So there's big ties between poverty as well as boredom, as well as kids experiencing things for the first time as well. That's why you can see a lot of alcoholism specifically in places like our territories, just because there's not a lot to do out there. It's really cold. There's not a lot of work, which comes into the poverty conversation as well. And so you're going to see those rises of recreational uses of substance and abuse of substance.
And with this abuse, though, let's talk about solutions. How does someone get help for himself or herself or a loved one? What is the pathway?
I assume the first pathway would be some sort of private rehab center. Of course, you have to have the money for that. So if it's already a poverty issue, then that money doesn't necessarily exist.
Sam?
So in the solution that most of Canada seems to have is that it's almost like a stalling. I keep on the Canadian government classifies safe injection sites as is commonly known as safe consumption sites, and their purpose, as defined on the Government of Canada website, isn't to rehabilitate people. It's just to reduce the amount of deaths associated with the consumption of illegal drugs through contamination or overdose. So I don't think necessarily the system we have right now is the best for rehabilitating people. And there's this great documentary called Seattle's Dying, which is about the homelessness and the opioid problem in Seattle. And they found that, well, they're going through the same kind of ethos that we are. They have the same ethos that we have right now, in the sense that safe injection sites and more faux empathetic solutions are the best way to solve these problems. And the documentary found, it was a local news documentary, that they call direct intervention was the best way to actually rehabilitate people. And they referenced specifically a center in Providence, Rhode Island, and they have this thing called the MAT program, which was medication-assisted treatment. And the people were, if they were found to be carrying or using opioids, they were essentially apprehended by police, and they were put into these forced rehabilitation programs. And I have some stats right here. Inside the program, they were given counselors, group sessions, like they were given full support. It was very compassionate. They defined it as tough but compassionate. And they had a 93% follow-up rate after they were done the rehab. So people were actually coming back and taking these, they're called opioid blockers. There's methadone, Suboxone, and Vivitrol. And these are found to be very successful in, I guess, blocking the desire, the urge to consume whatever opioid they might be using at the time. And they found, besides the 93% follow-up rate, which is outstanding, they found a 65% decrease in mortality with people that had a history of incarceration, whether that was for the opioids or possible crimes they were committing to obtain the money or the drugs themselves. So I think that's what we should be implementing in Canada, or specifically in the cities that have found troubles, like we mentioned, Vancouver and Hamilton, Calgary. I have some stats on Calgary we can talk about later. But
So your take would be essentially incarceration, but it would be rehabilitation.
Well, yeah, it is explicitly rehabilitation, but it is...
But through more aggressive means.
Yeah, it is, but it's not aggressive because we want to punish them. It is a rehabilitation. It is empathetic because they do have evidence that is extremely successful. And these people, they have testimonies from people that were in jail otherwise for 20 years, but once they had gone through this required rehabilitation, they had successful lives, and they said getting incarcerated saved them. So I think that's a very profound thing, and we should adopt that.
So I'm on the website for the Canadian government's website for their supervised consumption sites.
Yep.
So one of the key goals, according to this, is to facilitate entry into drug treatment services.
I remember reading that specifically, but facilitate is very weak language, right?
I wouldn't say that. I don't think it's fair to say it's faux empathetic. I don't think they're expecting people to, I don't think they don't want people to get clean.
Sure, I just think they're using the wrong methods.
And it just seems does seem to be a lot of variance on what staff are there. Like, they say they generally include nursing staff, social workers, and peer and community workers. So I think you're being a little bit harsh with Canada's system. It does seem like they have social workers and peer and community workers would be able to do the kinds of work that would lead to rehabilitation. And that's probably where the facilitation of entry into drug treatment services comes in.
It also comes down, you can never force somebody to go to therapy. That doesn't work.
Yeah, it does, because I just said, they had a 93% follow-up rate when they were forced to be given the opioid
And
blockers.
this is Seattle, right?
No, so the documentary was about Seattle,
Okay.
but they went across the country to Providence, Rhode Island, where this program, the MAT
Okay.
program, was being conducted, and there they found.
So that's where
How
we get
long
these
is
stats from.
Yeah, how long is that success rate though? They followed up, but did they relapse ever? Did they go back to where they were?
So I believe the program's been around for about a decade, and I think their information would be based on that. They have a 93% follow-up rate, which means that they're consistently coming back to the center, I think, every week to get these opioid blockers. And they're done free of charge, and there's doctors, counselors, all in the one facility, and that's what they attributed to its success.
And so let's go back to safe injection sites. Do you want to pull up the poll that we asked our viewers? So safe injection sites are, as you mentioned, a way to reduce the reduce the amount of overdose deaths, but it's not necessarily rehabilitation. So Sam,
Explicitly. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not explicitly rehabilitation. They say the language they use. I was very meticulous in reading. They facilitate rehabilitation, so they might provide you the option to go through these treatments where they provide opioid blockers, but it's not really regimented and forced upon them.
So, do you want to just remind us what the question was and how many votes we had?
Sure. Just give me a moment.
And Jessica, in the meantime, you can pull up our Instagram poll. We had the exact same question. Are safe injection sites the right choice?
We had a big difference in the two. 69% said yes, they are helpful, and 31% said no, which is 18 for yes and 8 for no.
Wow.
Which I think
that's a lot of votes.
Yeah.
And Sam, what on Facebook?
So we asked, are safe injection sites the right way to help combat addiction? And 65% said yes, 35% said no. With 69 votes, 24 said no, and 45 said yes, they are.
Interesting. And what's everyone's takes here? I know you said, Sam, that you are not for safe injection sites. Jessica?
I'm very much for it. Yeah. I mean, it's not just here's clean needles, which is a big part of it. It also provides referrals for drug treatment, housing and income support, education on overdose prevention and intervention, and medical and counseling services. The thing is, if there's people that are suffering from drug addiction and usage, it's not like you're going to stop them by doing, because it's already illegal. So it's not like you're going to not do it. So if you provide at least, I think it's the option that we have right now. I don't know if one day there'll be something better than what we have right now. But for what our sources and what our resources are for the moment, I think they're essential. It allows individuals to at least go somewhere where they can be monitored if they're going to use clean needles. So it prevents on HIV and different viruses that could be contacted through injecting something into your body. It really limits overdosing problems, just because you're going to have medical staff on hand if you were to overdose. And not only all of that side of things for the actual use of the drugs, but it provides support and counseling options if somebody were willing to take it, education, medical and counseling services, and healthcare.
Sam, you don't think so?
No, I think those are all great and they are necessary, but as long as the individuals in question, the people that are addicted, aren't given these opioid blockers, it's just a vicious cycle, and we're just going to throw more money at it. And it's not going to solve anything. I have stats from Calgary. When Calgary implemented a safe injection site in one of their neighborhoods, they saw a 276% increase in drug-related calls around the injection site, a 50% increase in violent crime, 63% increase in vehicular crime, which I guess would be breaking into vehicles, I'm assuming. Break-ins went up a total of 60%, and total calls went up 36%. So I think all the things you mentioned are very necessary, but unless you also include mandatory opioid blockers, and if you don't take them, you are incarcerated. I mean, that's the only other option. Eventually, if someone, I think, will take the opioid blockers and realize how much it's improving their life, and like I said, it has a wonderful success rate, I apologize. It's early in the morning. And I think that's the best thing we can do.
Jessica, yeah, you've been holding your tongue for a while. Go ahead.
So you say that there's 69% increase in like crime and issues around the safe injection sites?
276% increase in drug-related calls
Okay,
around the
so
injections.
so that could be, let's say, is it me?
I might be.
Sorry, I'm making noise. Anyway, let's say I make, like, Ryerson opens up a safe injection site right here, like, well, pretty close to campus. Does that mean, like, if there is a rise in crime and everything that is going on right in that specific area, that doesn't mean that, like, what about areas that it used to be high? Has there been a decrease in other areas surrounding that it used to be high, but now it's decreased and now it's all been central to this one?
Most likely.
Yeah,
You're
so, like,
concentrating users of
Exactly.
opioids
I mean, just
in one
because it
area.
has increased in one area doesn't mean that it's also increased in other areas. It's just kind of centered where that usage is going to happen and where those problems are going to occur. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily an argument for and against safe injection sites. Obviously, if there's going to be an area where individuals can use safely, then there's going to be a rise of, you know, other there's people that are using are not going to just be the rich millionaire on Bay Street. I mean, there's a lot more issues with usage than just that's just black and white. It affects a lot of people from the homeless community. And so, yeah, there might be a rise of that individual around that certain specific area. But it also could have decreased around somewhere that's farther off and where it used to be high.
Yeah, but is the purpose of the safe injection site to concentrate this
It does
violence
get it
and
off the
crime
streets,
in-
and that is an argument for it.
But that's not the purpose of it. The purpose should be to rehabilitate these people.
There
There could be
are
multiple
side effects
persons.
of it.
Yeah.
I also have some numbers on Vancouver. So after they instituted a safe injection site, there were 67% fewer ambulance calls for treating overdoses, and the overall amount of overdose deaths per person, like there were 88 fewer deaths per 100,000 people. So I don't think, like, I think we can have a conversation about what's best, but I don't think it's fair to say that, like, safe injection sites aren't, you know, useless.
I think those are used as that is the be all end all of the solution, and I don't think that is appropriate.
I also think there's like, if we're going to talk about incarcerating people, that's kind of pushing mental health issues onto the justice system. And I don't know if necessarily criminalizing addiction is the best way to deal with it.
No, but you're saving themselves from mental health issues. I don't think that's can be. I don't think those two can be attributed to
I
each
think
other.
addiction is a mental illness. So
Yes, of course,
I think,
but
yeah.
if not a lot of mental illnesses can be remedied with just like an opioid blocker, or what's it called? An opioid receptor blocker.
Yeah, so I don't think that we should be treating people with mental illnesses
They're not
with
criminals.
the criminal justice system. I
No.
think they should be treated in the mental health system. So
Sure,
I think
but
conflating
carrying-
the two is not necessarily
It
the best
shouldn't
thing.
be considered. You shouldn't be like institutionalized, or it shouldn't be considered incarceration. If that's the vocab that you're going to use around this whole idea, it kind of it criminalizes mental health victims.
Well,
It
carrying and
criminalizes-
using illegal drugs is legal, and they should be incarcerated. But
Well, the war on drugs is documented to not really work.
yes, because the laws aren't properly enforced, and the border.
Where's the documentation about
So
that?
I don't want to get into the war on drugs. I want to talk
But that's
about.
what you're talking about, criminalizing people who are carrying and using illegal drugs. That's
Yes.
the war on drugs.
Well, are we talking about drug dealers or people that are victims of the drugs?
But if somebody is carrying a drug that they intend to use,
Yeah.
that's illegal.
Yes.
And they will be incarcerated.
Yes.
So they're not a dealer. That's the drug user. That's
Yeah.
the addict.
They're the victim of the situation.
Yeah.
And that could be because of a bunch of other factors going on in their personal lives. I think they shouldn't be. What is that? Do you hear that?
It's just your mic is shaking.
Oh, I have such a powerful voice. Anyway, but I don't forget what I was
I'll
saying.
just bring it down more. Now you can hear it, yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, we shouldn't. What was I saying? Yeah, you shouldn't
Get close.
incarcerate individuals because. Oh my goodness. Because of what they're suffering with in their personal lives, and
But
it
it's
shouldn't
not-
be called incarceration.
Sure, but it's not punishment, right?
It is punishment. If you're incarcerating an individual against their will, that's punishment.
Yes, but it provides them with the drugs and the medical support and the psychiatric support, the whatever psychologists I'm sure they have there that relieve them of their addiction. I mean, I'm sure most, if not all, opioid addicts don't, if they were of clear mind, they wouldn't want to be addicted, right? And there's numerous testimonies throughout this documentary I'm referencing that the people are thankful that they were incarcerated. Incarcerated is a general term. They were taken off the streets and given these opioid blockers. They have a tremendous success rate, 93%. I mean, if we really want to talk about what's best for people that are addicts, they're victims, right? They are committing a criminal act. The dealers are the bad guys, right? But
And what are we doing about them?
Well, they should
Why
be.
aren't they incarcerated?
They should be.
I think that the vocab behind this whole situation should just be about rehabilitation,
Sure.
and we shouldn't like it to have. And what do they have criminal records now that they have been in prison?
To my knowledge, no.
So it shouldn't be considered.
Sure, it should be called maybe
incarceration.
forced intervention. I think is the other term they used.
Still, like as long you shouldn't have to victimize, and there shouldn't be the conversation around making people necessarily feel bad about what they're suffering from, and because you've done this, now you are in prison, and now you are forced to do something. It should be about the whole purpose of rehabilitating for the healthiness of their body and their healthiness of their mind.
Mm-hmm.
We should be starting to tackle against the people that are producing and selling and corruption in the pharmaceutical side of things. Like that's where the incarceration terminology should come into play.
But
I agree.
in regards to both safe injection sites and forced rehabilitation, as you called it, is that the government's job? Is that the taxpayer's job to help
think
addicts?
In a free and
It's-
democratic society, kind of.
I understand why people don't like the idea of drug users getting tax money. I think a lot of people look at it as, well, I'm not, you go out and you choose to take drugs and you choose to get addicted to them. Why should I have to pay for your rehabilitation? Whether it's the forced intervention or safe injection sites. But I think at the end of the day, we live in Canada where we have like universal healthcare. So we're all going to end up having to pay for the hospitalizations and the overdose deaths. And also, like, having less people die from overdoses is a net good for society. So I think it's a worthwhile way that the government spends their tax dollars however they decide to do it.
Sure, but no one's going to have an overdose when they're being monitored 24/7 in a forced intervention.
I'm saying
center,
that
if you wanna-
regardless of the way,
Sure.
I think that the government dealing with addiction is something that our tax dollars
But-
should go to.
but-
Because even if they implemented this thing that you're doing, that would still be government implementation.
Oh, of course. I'm not against government intervention. Like, I think that's a good thing.
Okay.
Well, you're for big government generally. Your moral
I'm
government,
government
is your...
moral
conservative.
good government. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your morals? Whose morals? What morals?
Moral is so subjective.
No, it's not.
Yes, it
anyway,
is.
I don't want to get into this discussion because I'll be
Well,
right.
let's
Next
let's
episode.
talk about this.
Did you say you'd be right? That's pretty cocky.
Yeah.
Why are your morals better than my morals?
Well, would you want people dying of opioid?
Did I ever
That's
say that?
a very
So
fair way to frame that
doesn't
question.
seem
My morals are
subjective
I don't
then.
want people to die from overdose
And-
deaths.
Doesn't seem
Your
subjective
morals
then.
must be that you do, because
That
that's the
is
only thing that a
subjective.
moral argument can be
Yeah.
made for, whether or not people should die from overdose deaths.
Morality
No,
is
it's just an
so
example.
broad.
No, not
Yes,
really.
it is.
Is that a
We
cultural
have different.
relativist?
We have different opinions on many, 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 many things.
Yeah.
Does that mean I'm a less moral person than you?
No, you just have the wrong opinions on those.
I have the wrong opinions.
Yeah, probably.
Because I'm pro-choice, and because I'm a feminist, and because I care about the equality of individuals, I'm wrong.
I think we should be glad to live in a society where morality isn't actually morality isn't entirely dictated by the government. Of course, the
Just
government
parts of
should.
it.
Yes, I think murder is a bigger deal than
Yeah.
premarital sex.
Is it?
Personally, I don't. If you don't, that's your business. But I do.
How do you
So
make
I
that,
think.
how do you make that value judgment? Okay, this is
How do I
this
make
is
the
so off
value
topic.
judgment between having sex before you're married or killing somebody? Like, that's not a genuine question.
Really? But how to explain?
Explain?
Yeah.
Well, I think people dying are worse than people. Like, I think that's worse for everyone than
Why?
people having sex before marriage.
What
Why?
does having
Because
sex
somebody's
before marriage
dead,
do?
and now they can't contribute to society at all, and
So
they're
it's just
dead.
like an economic contribution?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
I think I'm glad that we live in a society where we can have different morals on most things, other than the big things like murder or rape or crime. And I don't have to
Crime.
live.
What kind of crime?
I don't have to live in a society dictated by Samuel's morals, because that would be a
See, when you get into
dystopian hell.
specifics, that's sort of-
I think
You can say, Samuel, just for future reference, you can say that, you can believe in your morals. I can believe in my moral compass. That doesn't make me wrong. And I don't think that necessarily makes you wrong. I don't agree with you on a billion things. Do I necessarily think you are wrong? No, because that is your right in a democratic society to have those opinions. I am not wrong because it is my right in a democratic society to have my opinions.
I feel like people who want to enforce their personal morals and everyone else tend to be not very comfortable with them.
I disagree.
I don't know why everyone has to live life the way you do. You do you.
Well, back to safe injection sites. Morally, not even morally speaking, but let's talk about the safe injection site by Ryerson.
Disgusting.
Okay. So we're talking.
Yeah, oh, great. Let's not get opinionated, shall we?
Who said that?
Obviously you said it's
yeah.
disgusting. Sam, you're not a fan either.
It is an embarrassment.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Jessica, because look at it this way, right? We have. If you're going to have a safe injection site, don't put it near students.
No,
that's
it's a
not
university
safe.
campus where we're not children. Most people here are over 18, but young people are walking around. There's also campus visits that happen, especially this time of year, and nobody's going to come to your campus if there's somebody like masturbating on the corner, and that's like a normal thing. Like, I think it's attracted so much crime, and just if you get the security incident emails from Ryerson, there's way more of them. There's sharps boxes in every bathroom. I think it's
That's
not
also not for
great.
just injection. That's for like diabetes and a bunch of different things like that.
I feel like they've
That's true.
Yeah, but that is what I was going to say. Like, why are we having boxes in every single bathroom?
Well, I mean, if Ryerson can't control, like, the safe injection site is here, so I think it makes sense for them to have the sharps boxes, because if not, needles are going to be places in that source.
But I mean, like, we shouldn't have to have that problem.
No, absolutely not. I don't think it should be, like, it's basically on campus, like, it's connected to Victoria Building, so I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, I just avoid that whole street now.
Yeah, I've seen some terrible things, and like you mentioned, the incident reports, but I've seen people openly defecating, masturbating, people getting assaulted, people talking to themselves and yelling, and
Yeah, I've heard of people
intimidating
asking
people. Yeah,
people asking, like, girls asking guys in their classes to walk them to Dundas, for example, because they don't feel, especially if you have a class that ends later, it gets dark pretty soon now.
yeah. Some classes end at 9 p.m.
Yeah, and then you're
on
walking
campus.
to a subway station. And that's, like, if you're walking down Vic, it's just not going to be a good time, I think.
Yeah, it's if it's obviously worse for girls. I would say it's less safe.
Well, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, you feel more threatened.
That's a global thing, though. It's not just Victoria Street.
No, but I think being women tend to be smaller than men, right? And tend to be, I just would say, bigger targets. I feel like I can do less to defend myself against a man who's, if he's on some sort of drug, is not even in his right mind than a guy can. So I think just that in general is pretty scary. And I feel like it probably does affect women on campus. Or maybe just the fear and anxiety for women is heightened.
Yeah, I can personally attest to that.
I think the majority of those individuals tend to be male, so there's that whole men preying on women dichotomy part of it, which I think is makes it extremely difficult.
I think it just goes back to who's an easier target, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So let's wrap up with the real solution. Is there gonna be a time that we get where there's no overdose deaths, but less? Are we gonna see Canada implement the same thing that what was it? Seattle you mentioned was implementing?
No, it was implemented in Providence, Rhode Island.
Providence, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
So do we see a future where that kind of technique is going to be implemented here?
I feel like it's a lot more involved than what's happening right now. So I don't know if the government is necessarily going to divert that much attention and energy towards it, especially because it looks pretty bad to be giving government funds to drug addicts.
So I didn't mention, but I should have. I think they mentioned in the documentary that it actually decreased the amount of government resources that were being used to treat these people or rehabilitate
I believe
them.
that, but I think just the way that it would look to the public, like in voters and stuff like that, I don't think that they would necessarily like it.
You'd have to present it in a way. Here's a way we can actually rehabilitate people, and they have much less chance of following up in this. They're not going to be reincarcerated, right? There's a good follow-up rate in the sense that they're taking their drugs, their opioid blockers, consistently. So you'd have to present it as it's cost-effective and it's empathetic. And I think it's probably going to have to get much worse than it is right now. I've only ever seen the population in front of those safe injection sites increase since they've been implemented.
I agree. Jessica?
Um,
I know you've been trying to process all of what has just happened, but what's your take on what's going to happen in Canada in the future? Or what should happen, rather?
Yeah, I think safe injection sites right now, for what we're doing and where we are at this point in time, they're an absolute necessity, and they're doing what they can as of right now. I think it should increase, and I think there should be more resources, and there should be more free mental health services and places to go for rehabilitation. And that's just free mental health services for like not just individuals who are suffering from drug use, but for literally any ailment. And so, yeah, I really hope it does increase. I really hope we do start doing a little bit more. Maybe if it's some form of like really intense rehabilitation that is not deemed as incarceration. And yeah, that I think we can do as much as we're doing as much as we can. I think right now, maybe I don't want to like put my name on that exact statement, but because I do always think that there's room to grow and there's room to do more, and I hope in the future that we see a lot more being done.
Ford like threatening to defund safe injection
It is
sites?
on its way out.
I doubt that he would institute something better though. I feel like he would just scrap it.
Oh
and
yeah.
Well,
nothing
then
else would happen.
No, it serves a purpose right now in reducing the amount of overdose deaths, which I don't disagree with.
No, I'm saying I don't think that Ford would do something else,
Sure.
something
well, then
better.
I would disagree with him.
I don't think
they
a
should have something
conservative
better.
Ontario like government would necessarily do anything better.
Well, they have a large deficit, and they have some kind of fetishization about small government, which I disagree with. But I would see, if they were to eliminate, I think it's already pretty much a matter of fact that they're going to eliminate it, that they would implement some sort of program like I discussed.
Well, they
have.
better
I doubt it.
do something.
Well, what are they going to do though? So let's say they eliminate the safe injection site. Where are all these people going to go?
They're gonna
just
be
stick
on the
around
streets.
You're gonna
They
have
might
a
not
rise
stick
of
around.
overdose.
They might not have a reason to stick
Says-
around Ryerson specifically. Like maybe they'll leave campus, but they're going to be downtown.
Do you find it's going to be more dangerous?
Definitely.
Maybe not more dangerous on campus, but,
Right, but
downtown,
downtown.
in general. Yeah, probably. Because they're not going to not be addicts anymore. And then they're going to be going to like using dirty needles again and committing crimes in order to get their drugs.
Yeah, the best way possible they could solve this were if they introduced or opened a new facility that did this forced rehabilitation, and then closed the one they have down currently and gradually transfer people over to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't just have nothing.
Yeah, it's a bad idea. I agree.
And on that note, the fact that Samuel and Jessica agree on something, that was our show for this week. Thank you to everybody that tuned in and commented on our feed. A brand new episode of the Raben Report will be coming to you next week, same day, same time, same people. Have a great day, everyone.